So I'm here to talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and broadly, what is it? What are some of the risks? What are some of the challenges? And what are the needs for change? And the reason is that there's a lot of hoo-ha, a lot of noise, and a lot I think is fairly distracting. But if you look at HBR, Harvard Business Review, or McKinsey, or VentureBeat, or some of the more academic sources, Forbes comes to mind, you'll see all kinds of utility and examples and trends. And I think words get mishmashed sort of together. Predictive analytics, what the heck is that? Can we truly predict the next word in a line or the next business market opportunity? There's not good clarity about that. Artificial tools of what's often called artificial human intelligence are simply algorithms, compilations of ways to anticipate the next word. And you've seen this before. If you go to Google and you say, how do I, it'll fill in the next words. And Google's number one search engine in the world. Number two is YouTube, which they own. And if you were to ask, what is whatever, it'll do the same thing, right? It'll fill it in. As searches define uses, Google then looked around and said, well, Google Trends is a beautiful thing. If I want to know the number of mentions of COVID in New Jersey, I can track that, I can trend that. And then they realized that people were using Gemini, which is their artificial intelligence tool, to track some of the next phases in utility. So AI is generating changes within Google, and it has for decades. But now the browser for Gemini is the default browser that you'll see in Google. So what's going on? Microsoft has been doing this with Copilot for some time, and you can use Copilot for all kinds of editing and various tools. You can also create a chat GBT that's unique or customizable. Some call it a closed chat. I've done this, and I can teach anybody how to do so. It's exciting and a little unusual in the sense that I could create a GBT, a way to reference my books and my dissertation and a bunch of research and a bunch of my blogs and websites and transcripts, and ask it a question. How would Doug respond to yada, yada? And it'll provide evidence based on that data in a closed system. And also you can push a button so it does not share with the large language model. So now it's a closed system. Businesses can do the same thing. So if I've got a legal reason to maintain confidentiality with clients, let's say I'm a small business owner, I don't want to reveal any of that to a large language model, but I do want to provide something of unique value to those clients. Well, that's why you see so many bots that used to be called robots, now they're called bots, now they're called chatbots, that provide some kind of answers. When you go to a website, it's not as easy to talk to a person, in part because it's not very cost efficient for the company. If you go to your Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard site, you're not necessarily going to expect to talk to a person anymore. The bot can answer some of those questions, right? It can also provide investment strategies and suggestions about planning and personalized investments that you could consider over time. So what does that mean? Largely means that we're providing more and more digital trust in the AI, the artificial tools. A great example of this is Amazon, which when it created the Prime package, people initially said, no, that'll never fly. But they had a good market response, I'm sure, which led them to use one-touch purchases, or those little prompts that say, people like you have bought this product. Well, they didn't do it randomly or arbitrarily. They did it based on a large data set, which indicated that when you buy this book by this author, you're more likely to buy this book by another author. And it started with books, as you know, and then it expanded. When we think about the implications of artificial intelligence ahead, I think they're a little staggering. So for the last year, I've always followed technology, but for the last year, I've followed ways in which AI can be used to accelerate leadership development, because that's my sweet spot. There's a lot I can't do. But when I look at some of those implications, now there's 24/7 utility. I can provide, and I have, a couple of websites. One is a B2C, one's a B2B, and the B2C is a resource, a way for somebody to click and interact with an artificial intelligence avatar based on a bunch of role plays and a bunch of scenarios that are unique to that person. So it's totally confidential. Imagine clicking on ChatGPT and asking it a question. And you do it again and again and again. And you get a lot of insight into a topic, a problem. How do I deal with anxiety? How do I sleep better? How do I have a conversation with somebody in my family who's not been receptive to the idea of conversations? Well, those are skills. Decades ago, if I asked Google, can you be my executive coach? At that time, it said no, it was teasing me. Today, it'll say, of course. And it doesn't matter what platform you've got. It'll all say that, whether it's Alexa or Siri. Just said Siri. So if you're listening to this, your phone probably popped up. Isn't that creepy? It's another example of artificial intelligence being integrated into our lives. When I watch a football game or a golf match with my wife, she will use Siri in the interactions, or I will, and it's as if there's a third person in the room. Well, Siri wasn't a part of our lives 10 years ago or 2 years ago. There she goes again. But she is now, or it is. So our expectations are shifting for artificial intelligence. It's more personalized than ever. It's digitally available. And digital trust is a thing that psychologists can track and measure. So let's assume that there'll be, for instance, a bunch of tools that can be used in any consulting business. So my ADFIT model, ADFIT, is trademarked in part because the awareness that we need to have about ourselves and others is going to lead to the D. How do we define meaningful outcomes? Well, with an engagement, the A and the D define the depth of that relationship. And then every time I have a session with somebody, I'll ask the F and the I and the T. What do you want to focus on today? Have you considered this interaction or intervention? And what are you taking away from this session at the end of the call? So sometimes after 30 minutes or 60 minutes, that client is delighted. They'll leave and they'll look at their notes. Maybe I'll provide a Zoom AI integration summary, and they'll use those notes as well to accelerate their learning. Let's take it a step farther. Let's imagine that now, as part of their takeaways, they state, sure, I'm willing to interact with an avatar. I understand that it's all confidential. So it's GDPR compliant and SOC2 compliant. And there's lots of ways in which that security is maintained. But the primary one is that, let's use me as an example. I click on it. Doug's recordings are only viewable by Doug. Even as an administrator, I can't see anybody else's recordings, any of my licensees, any of my clients. But I can ask, so George, have you used this platform in the last 2 weeks or a week or whatever it's been? He says, yeah. I say, sure, great. George, are you willing to share that with me? And George says, absolutely. You're my coach. Of course I would. Now we've got an opportunity for me as a human to interact with George and George's interactions with that AI. And I can ask, okay, George, show me. And George pulls up his screen. So I'm using its record on his screen to provide hybrid coaching or hybrid consulting. And I'll say, George, I don't see any recordings here. Am I missing something? Say, oh, yeah, I guess I need to do more of that, don't I? I said, well, only if you're interested in developing that sales competency or that particular competency that's going to accelerate your communication. And it could be that George's manager wants him to develop some of those skills, but George doesn't want to go to his manager. How do I become a better communicator? So George needs to practice over and over and over using artificial intelligence in a transparent model, a transparent system, some accountability, so that when we have our direct sessions, now we've got a hybrid consulting experience. You can do the same thing with any consultant. Imagine you're a lawyer and you've got a client who says, yeah, I really want to talk to my kids about succession planning, or a family wealth advisor. Same scenario. Those are tough conversations for a lot of folks, and they're not particularly skillful. So if the next gens or the patriarchs and matriarchs practice on AI, they can find the right words. I can give them a rubric. I can coach them through a protocol that will accelerate that learning and their changes. So these are examples, and they're not futuristic. I told you I've got 2 scenarios. One's B2B, business to business, and one's B2C. So any individual can click on one of my websites and ask that role player avatar scenario, how do I deal with anxiety? How do I deal with burnout? How do I deal with a difficult sibling? How do I deal with a husband who, fill in the blanks? And there'll be a number of role plays. Some are able to address important questions like, how do I develop my faith? How do I increase my purpose in life? Well, these are not easy conversations, right? And there could be a number of different data points. I tend to favor those that are peer-reviewed or on Google Scholar because I'm an academic and I think that that's critically important. The artificial intelligence that I use also does the same. So when I think about the ways in which a B2C user, an individual user, could click on that website, of course it's worth $100 a month. Of course they do it again and again and again. And if they did it for a year, it's a $1,200 investment. They're going to get massive value from it. If they spend 2 hours with me, they could also invest $1,000, but they may not get as much power from it as reinforced learning over that 12-month period. And there's a guarantee with that. If anybody were to use that tool as little as 5 minutes a week, I know they're going to change their behaviors. If they don't, we'll give them their money back. That's fine. But I know that when people practice new behaviors again and again and again, like any athlete, they're going to get better. So that's the B2C model. The B2B model is designed for teams. It could be a company or a group that is looking at how do we implement this new product. There's data which indicates that when sales teams do these AI consulting assisted coaching templates, like I just described, they accelerate their learning by, their sales by 24%. That's massive. 97% increase in retention. Most people who do online literacy training programs don't see a significant result. And I think that's criminal. We can do a better job. So the bottom line, the conclusion here is artificial intelligence has always been developed. It's at a different place now where it's more consumer friendly than ever. It's something that you and I can use immediately, just as you talk to Siri, just as you use ChatGPT. I imagine you'll be able to use some of these AI assisted coaching and consulting tools to accelerate your own skills, but also your communication with other people and achieve outcomes faster, cheaper, and more effectively. And to me, those are not only noble goals, they're critical. We're going to continue probably to interact with our AI driven cars in our AI boosted world. Why wouldn't we do the same with leadership development and executive coaching? So, should you have any questions about how to use artificial intelligence in your world, please reach out, Doug at action-learning.com or action-learning.com. There's a lot of websites and a lot of content that I can make available to you, and it's probably worth your time to talk in real life. So my calendar is on there as well. I'm Doug Gray. Glad to be a resource. All the best.